The school that my mother owned in Scarborough was a short distance from the sea. I loved being near the sea, and I would sometimes walk along the beach in my free time. I awoke on the third morning after my return from Ashby Park and saw that the sun was shining. Knowing that my mother would still be asleep, I quietly got dressed and left the house to go for an early morning walk. The sea air was fresh and the summer sky was a clear blue. I walked along the long, empty beach and watched the white waves as they came up onto the sand. I felt full of life, and as I walked along, I forgot all of my worries. At first I was alone on the beach, but as the sun rose higher in the sky, I saw that a few people had appeared. There were now several figures ahead of me exercising horses or taking dogs for a walk. As I approached the end of the beach, I heard a dog bark behind me. Then suddenly, a small animal came running round in front of me and stopped right at my feet. It was Snap, the rough little dog that had been mine at Horton Lodge. I called his name and he jumped up into my arms. I was so pleased to see him, and he was clearly excited to see me. But how had he got here? He could not have come so far on his own, so I looked to see who he might be with. I turned around and saw Mr. Weston. "Your dog remembers you well, Miss Gray," he said warmly. "You must get up very early." "Not often as early as this," I said, still very much surprised to see both Mr. Weston and Snap. "I imagine you must live quite close to the beach then. In what part of the town do you live?" he asked. "I never managed to find out." Never managed to find out? Had he been looking for me then? I felt my heart jump in my chest. Then I remembered that he had asked me a question, so I told him where our house was. He asked if the school was doing well. I told him that several more pupils had come to join the school since the new year had started, and that we were doing very well. "People must have heard that you were a very good teacher then," he said. "No, it is my mother they have heard about," I replied. "She works very hard and manages things so well, and she is so active, clever and kind." "I would like to meet your mother. Will you introduce me to her one day if I come to your house?" he asked. "Yes, of course I will," I told him. "And would it be all right if I came to visit you every now and then?" Mr. Weston wanted to know. "Yes, I don't think my mother would mind," I replied. We turned and started to walk back along the beach together. "You haven't asked me why I have come to Scarborough," he said after a few moments' silence. "Surely you can't think that I am rich enough to be here on holiday?" "Well, I heard that you had left Horton," I said. "But you hadn't heard that I am the new vicar of a parish just 2 miles from here?" he asked. "No," I said. "I don't receive much news from Horton." "Well then, congratulations. I very much hope that you like your new parish and your new job." "I think I will like it more in a year or two," he said, "when I have made some of the changes there that I think are needed. It is certainly wonderful to have a parish all to myself with nobody to disagree with me and tell me how I should do things differently." Of course, he was talking about Mr. Hatfield. Then he added, "And I am lucky enough to have a nice house in a good area and a salary of £300 a year. In fact, I have nothing but loneliness to complain about, and there is nothing I could wish for apart from someone to share all of that with." He looked directly at me as he spoke these last few words, and I felt my cheeks go red. I felt embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sure that when you are well known in your new parish," I said quickly, "there will be many women there who will be keen to share that life with you." "I am not so presumptuous as to expect there will be a lot of women who want to marry me," he said. "But even if there were so many, I am looking for a very special type of person to share my life with. Perhaps I wouldn't find that person among the ladies of my parish." "If you were looking for perfection, to find someone who has no faults at all," I told him, "then I don't think you will ever find that person." "No, I am not looking for perfection," he replied. "I have no right to, because I am certainly not perfect myself." We had reached the town now, and before we walked up the bank onto the street, he offered me his arm to support me. I put my arm in his. Once we were in the street, the horses, carriages and men moving around us made it difficult to talk. We walked in silence for a few minutes, arm in arm, before he spoke again. "You don't often go down to the beach, do you?" he said. "I have walked there many times since I have come here. I have come both morning and evening, and I have never seen you until now. And I have looked for your school as I have walked about the town, but have never found it. Once or twice I asked if anyone knew of the school, but no one could tell me where the house was." He walked with me to the end of the street where I lived. "I'll leave you here, Miss Grey," he said kindly. "And when will you come to meet my mother?" I asked him. "I hope to come tomorrow," he told me. He said goodbye and then called Snap to him. The dog did not know which one of us he should follow. "I'm afraid I won't offer to give him back to you," said Mr. Weston, smiling, "because I like him." "Oh, I am happy not to have him," I replied. "Now that I know he has a very good owner, I won't need to worry about him any more." "You believe that I am a very good owner, then?" he said, and smiled again before walking away. I returned home full of happiness. I had been given another chance, and I hoped that this time I would be lucky. "Well, Agnes, you must not take such a long walk again before breakfast," said my mother. "Are you feeling ill?" She had seen that I had drunk an extra cup of coffee but had eaten nothing. I told her that I just did not feel hungry because I was hot and tired after my walk. The truth was that I was too busy thinking about how to tell my mother about Mr. Weston to think of eating. If he was coming to visit the next day, then I had to tell her that I had met him on the beach. I waited until breakfast had been taken away and until I had calmed down a little. Then, once I had sat down and started to do some drawing, I began. "I bumped into an old friend on the beach, Mother," I said. "An old friend?" she said. "Who on earth could that be?" "Two old friends, in fact," I told her. "One was a dog," and then I reminded her of Snap, who I had told her about in my letters from Horton Lodge. I now told her how he had suddenly appeared on the beach and had run to me. "And the other friend," I continued, "was Mr. Weston, the curate of Horton." "Mr. Weston? I've never heard of him before," my mother said. "Yes, you have," I corrected her. "I've mentioned him several times, I think, but you don't remember." "I've heard you talk about Mr. Hatfield," she told me. Mr. Hatfield was the vicar and Mr. Weston was the curate. Anyway, he was on the beach this morning with the dog. He must have bought it from someone in the village at Horton. We talked for a little while after the dog had found me. He asked about our school and how well it was doing. I told him it was doing very well thanks to your clever management. When I mentioned you, he said that he would like to meet you. Then he asked if I would introduce you to him if he happened to come by and visit tomorrow. So I said that I would. Was it all right for me to say that? "Of course," replied my mother. "What type of man is he?" "He is a very good man, I think, but you will meet him yourself tomorrow," I told her. "He is the new vicar in a village just 2 miles from here, and he has only been in that parish for a few weeks. I imagine that he has not yet made any new friends and would like some company." I spent the next morning feeling nervous and excited while I waited for him to come. He finally came at noon. Having introduced him to my mother, I moved away to the other side of the room to carry on with my drawing while they talked. They got on extremely well together. I was so pleased because I had been worried about what my mother would think of him. He did not stay long that time, but when he left, she said she would be happy to see him whenever he found the time to visit us again. After he had left, she said to me, "Well, I think he is a very sensible man. But why did you sit over there, Agnes? And why didn't you join in with the conversation?" "I didn't join in because you were having a good conversation and did not seem to need any help from me," I explained. "And anyway, he had come to see you, not me." After that, Mr. Weston often came to visit us. As it was the summer holidays and my mother and I were not teaching, he could come at any time during the day. When he came, he spoke mostly to my mother, but I did not mind that. She loved to talk, and I was happy to sit and listen to the 2 people I loved most in the world. Formality was quickly forgotten, and Mr. Weston began to call me Agnes instead of Miss Grey. The days when he did not visit seemed long and very dull, but I always had his next visit to look forward to. One evening, near the end of the summer holidays, he came to the house and asked me to go for a walk with him. He wanted to show me the wonderful view over the sea from a nearby hill. With my mother's permission, I agreed to go and went upstairs to get ready. I took a little longer than usual. When we left the house a few minutes later, I put my arm into his and we went through the busy streets of the town. As we walked quickly along, he said very little, and I began to think that something was wrong. But as we came out of the town, he slowed down a little, and he seemed cheerful again. "I'm sorry, Agnes," he said. "I think that I have been walking too fast for you. I was keen to get out of the town, but we can walk as slowly as you wish now. I think there is going to be a wonderful sunset." We walked in silence up the hill for a few minutes before he spoke again. "It is still quite lonely in my house," he said, and smiled at me. "And I have now met all of the ladies in my parish, and quite a few in this town too. But I'm not interested in any of them. In fact, there is only one person in the world that I want to share my life with. And that person is you, Miss Grey. Agnes, will you marry me?" "Are you serious, Mr. Weston?" I asked him, because I could not believe what I had heard. "Serious?" he cried. "How could you think that I would joke about something like this?" He put his hand gently over mine as it rested on his arm. He must have felt that I was feeling nervous. "I hope that I have not shocked you," he said in a serious way, looking at me closely. "You must have known that I am not the sort of man to flatter you all the time and talk romantic nonsense. I hoped that you would know that a single look or a single word of mine meant more than the many things that most other men use to flirt with women." I said nothing for a moment. Many thoughts were going through my head. "So, what is your answer?" he asked me. "But what about my mother?" I said nervously. "I'm not sure I could leave her to run the school on her own." "You don't need to worry about that," he told me gently. "While you were getting ready to come out for this walk, I talked to your mother. She said that she would be happy for you to marry me if that's what you wanted to do. I also suggested to her, in case you said yes, that she could come and live with us. I thought that you would like that, but she refused and said that she could now afford to employ an assistant to help her teach the pupils. So you can see that your mother will be fine. Is there anything else that you are worried about?" "No," I said. "No, there isn't." "Do you love me then?" he asked, holding my hand tightly in his. "Yes," I replied. "Yes, and I will be very happy to marry you." And here I will stop writing. My diary, in which I used to write these chapters, does not continue any further. I will just say that I will never forget that wonderful summer evening. I will always remember how we stood and watched that beautiful sunset together. My heart was filled with so much love and happiness that I could not have imagined being any happier. A few weeks after that, once my mother had found an assistant to help her at the school, I married Edward Weston. And I am so pleased that I did. We have had difficult times, and we know that we will have more, but we deal with them well together. We try to make the most of life, and we enjoy each other's company. Edward has made some surprising changes in his parish. He is a good man, and the people there love and respect him. Whatever his faults are as a man, and of course, everybody has their faults, no one could say that he is not a good vicar, husband, or father. Our children, Edward, Agnes, and little Mary, are doing well. At the moment they are mostly taught by me, and I try to give them as much love and care as a mother can. Edward's salary is more than enough for what we need. We try to be careful with the money we have. In this way, we live a comfortable life and manage to save a little, which we will give to our children when they leave home. We even have enough left to give something to others who might need it. I am grateful for the life that I have led so far. It is not the life of big houses and expensive parties that other people may have, but I think of myself as being lucky. And now I will end my story, because you can now easily imagine how I might happily spend the years that I have left to live.